Okay, guys, so now we have the notes. Let's go ahead and try to solve example U. So again, this is a quadratic equation because of the square. And I'm going to try to solve it by taking square roots. So when I first see this equation, I'm going to first start by putting a line through my equal sign. And as I stare at this left-hand side, my first task is to take this 3 and move it to the right-hand side. So when I see this, this is 3 times. So my first question is to undo times, I need to divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Once I do that, I'm left with x minus 5 quantity squared equals, and negative 18 divided by 3 is negative 6. At this point, because of the parentheses, now I can take care of this square. And we know that the opposite of a square is a square root. So I can square root both sides. When we take square roots, two things happen. First, the square root will cancel the square. So in this case, I'm left with just x minus 5. And then the second thing is I have to account for the automatic plus or minus that will occur here. So I have to add that plus minus sign. In this question, then, I'm left with the square root of negative 6 on this side. Now at this point, before today's notes, we would have gotten stuck here because a negative under the square root, we would say we have no real solutions. But now we have an alternative. We have complex solutions, which can handle a negative inside the square root. So from here, I can keep going. My next step is to take the negative 5 and move it to the right. I can undo a subtraction with an addition. So I'm going to now add 5 to both sides. So adding 5 and also putting it here on the right-hand side. So what I'm left with here is x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 6. Now to finish the simplification, I do want to take care of this negative under the square root. So we now know that negative 1, the square root of negative 1 equals to I. So I can take this minus sign out as an I variable, leaving me just the positive 6 inside. So with that last simplification, I get 5 plus or minus I radical 6, and I've now solved example U. And then guys, if I can, just one more example for support if needed. Let's try example number 1 in the classwork. Again, we just have a quadratic equation that we want to solve by taking square roots. So in this case, I'm going to first focus on moving this plus 6 to the right-hand side by subtracting 6 first. So once I do that, I'm left with x minus 5 squared equals, and then minus 18 minus 6 is minus 24. At this point, I can now focus on moving the square or canceling the square. And again, the opposite of a square is a square root. So I'll take that from both sides. Again, when you do take a square root, two things happen. The square root and the square cancel. And then I have to account for the plus and minus cases that would work here. Now, in this example, I have the square root of negative 24. So guys, in this case, this is a bigger number that I can simplify out. So think about the examples from above. To simplify the square root of negative 24, I can think of the factor pairs. So 24 is 1 times 24. It's 2 times 12. 3 times 8, and 4 times 6. And what I want to think about is, of these different factors, where do I see my largest perfect square? And if you scan this list, it's going to be 4. So I'm going to replace 24 with 4 times 6. Additionally, because I have that negative sign there, that's going to come out as an I. So what I have here is, I'm going to have the square root of negative 1 times 4 times 6, but I now know that this is going to simplify as the square root of 4 equals to 2. I know that radical negative 1 equals to I. So very quickly here, this is now going to be 2I radical 6. And then that's just going to be this radical negative 24. So this becomes 2I radical 6. To finish the question, I still have this minus 5 that I have to move by adding 5. And so I end up getting x equals 5 plus or minus 2I radical 6.